This is Remote Ruby.
Have you any remote idea to the meaning of the word?
Feels good to have all three of us here again.
Yeah, but welcome back in town.
I don't think that one is royalty free, so we might be might be effed on that.
Hit with a DMCA.
Yikes.
Yeah. Just delete our podcast. We're done here.
It's been a good run. I spent last week, while I wasn't here, I was in Kentucky in a lake house, but it wasn't on the lake. I could just see the lake, so I'm calling it a lake house. Yeah, you get it.
I see the lake house.
I see the lake house. It was awesome.
By the lake house.
I had 1.3 megabytes down on the Wi-Fi. Perfect. It was just enough to still watch the Netflix F1 Drive to Survive series, but not enough to do anything meaningful outside of watch TV. It's great.
I really like that series. I very much enjoyed that.
I'm into F1 now. We started watching it a few weeks ago. We finished it this week. It is so fascinating. 3 of my coworkers I know of, and they're all in Europe, they love it. And so I started talking to them about it. And one of them was actually at the race in France last week. So it was perfect timing for me to get into it.
Yeah, I think Austin Miller may have made it to one of the F1 races here in the States this year. I was pretty jealous. We have Circuit of the Americas in Austin, I believe.
Yeah.
And then I forget the name of the track in Miami, which was the first year of it, I believe, this year. But I remember there were pictures of it's in Miami, so they want water and boats. And they had actually painted the ground to look like there was water inside of the track or whatever. And it was all fake, but it kind of looked like it from the helicopter views or whatever. Yeah, that series I think is really good. It probably over dramatizes a lot of things, but
don't care.
It's really the story is really well told. So it's really, if you just watch F1, it's whatever. But the actual behind the scenes of them trying to figure things out and running through these issues and whatever else, that is what really, it's really awesome. I really enjoy that.
It's so good.
The combination of the driving, it's not just the drivers. They have so many actual engineering problems they have to overcome all the time, and sort of the politics too between the teams and fighting for the rules and whatever else. It's fascinating. I love it.
I didn't realize they actually engineer those cars from the ground up every year. They have one team actually manufactures their own parts with 3D printers and stuff.
Oh yeah, they're incredible. There was 1 year where Mercedes had taken a turbo, which normally is the hot and cold sides are kind of together, and they had separated them, and that gave them an enormous boost. Which an enormous boost in F1 is milliseconds or whatever per lap kind of thing. But they had little things like that they'd end up doing that just would be wow, this is pretty incredible. Just minor tweaks can make such a big difference there. Yeah, it's fun.
I think it's next year, 2023, they're doing an F1 race in Vegas. They are turning the strip and stuff around it. They are shutting it down and turning it to an F1 event. And I can only imagine how cool that's going to be.
And how expensive it is for them to shut that all down to even do it. As a city, that's got to be kind of crazy to say, okay, we're going to shut this main attraction down or elevate it for a little while. That's going to be insane. I don't know why that reminded me of, but we've got our driveway and grass, our sod is finally coming in. They put it in a month ago when it's a dead 100 degrees outside, and all our grass didn't really come in. So we've had the Amazon drivers basically coming in our driveway and doing their F1 lap and just going. I mean, they've driven off into the grass, I think, every single time someone's pulled in, where they'll pull in halfway and back out and just plow through the grass. So we could probably just use my front driveway too as a F1 track next year if anybody's looking for a new spot. Amazon's already doing it. So
I'm ready. Hey,
we could actually just use the Amazon trucks, and it's just the Amazon F1 series.
I was going to say, they plow through my neighborhood.
Yeah.
There's no way they're not competitive.
I know. There we go. We've invented the future of F1.
I got a solution for you, Chris. Rocks. You put big rocks there, or you do it the Arizona way and screw the grass, dude. Just rocks.
Yeah, we are probably going to put some big rocks there. Our landscaping guy was telling us about some like egg crate style stuff that's like plastic underneath the grass, and that will support it better. So when they go over, they're kind of still running on some hard surface instead. I was like, yeah, we could do that, but we could also just put a giant rock in there. But my guess was if we put giant rocks, they'll drive over those anyways. And then I'll just have like a tipped over Amazon truck in the middle of my driveway. So I guess everything inside of it is mine at that point.
Yeah.
I would assume.
We have little tiny rocks in our front yard instead of mulch. We have rocks, and it looks so cool until your kids are like old enough to play with them, and then they're everywhere and they're like throwing them at windows. And so
Landscaping in Arizona is like picking out a different color rock for your front yard.
I love the way it
Love it.
looks, but I fear for my life sometimes when my kids have them.
Yeah.
I can see that. We're planning to put a bunch of rocks like that in our backyard and stuff around the pool where the fence is and stuff. But I'm guessing it will be a similar situation once we have the little one and he's running around throwing stuff around. We had this major storm and we have this retaining wall by our pool, and it's all just dirt right now because the landscaper hasn't come through and done anything. But we had a 100-year storm come through and dump 12 inches of rain. And that retaining wall goes up to the foundation of our house, but the blocks are not like perfectly straight. And at the bottom, there's just like this giant thing of mud that had gotten really wet and then seeped through 5 feet of this retaining wall and just made a big old puddle at the bottom of mud. And there was like a couple places like that I found where we got married was flooded, and all this very, very expensive glass was just shattered all over the floor, and crazy times.
So Ruby
Yes.
Rails.
Ruby Rails. Yeah.
Rails.
I've heard of that before.
It's like Java and JavaScript. They're the same thing.
I've got a free gem idea.
Let's hear it.
All right.
For juniors or people who've never built a gem before, just to kind of get your feet wet on something really simple that you can actually show people. I found this idea on Twitter. Someone was doing it in the Node community, but they basically created an NPM package for their basically like a
left
business
tab.
card.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You got it. They basically created like a business card that would print out in the terminal when you ran their package. So a long time ago, I took that idea and built my own, which needs to be updated. If you gem install Andrew M codes and run the exe, it will like print my business card out into the terminal. So
Make your resume and then apply to jobs with that. That'd be pretty sweet.
yeah,
Damn it. I did that, but I didn't make it executable. You had to like download the script from GitHub. No wonder I never got hired from it.
nah, you gotta throw that exe.
This guy doesn't know how to chmod plus X.
Yeah. No wonder. It's amazing I'm here today.
Yeah. And you
think
don't do it with no packages. There's a bunch of really cool CLI packages you could find to like style the text if you want, or you could take it even further and use like the dry CLI or the Shopify CLI tool and add on to it. So ground level though, literally if you just run the exe, it just prints to the terminal. Anyone can do that. I feel like it's just kind of a fun place to kind of get your feet wet and learn how to do it.
And then of course you want to write your resume or CV as like a Ruby class and have it print out class as Jason Jones, initialize, blah, blah, blah. I like it.
So there's my free idea. So if you do this, send us the gem name so we can check it out.
I like it. That's a really good one. Good practice for building a gem. And it's probably one that a lot of people haven't made like a gem with an executable in it before. So it's a really good example just to fiddle with and like see how that works.
It's a real gem of an idea.
There's my contribution to Ruby.
The language as a whole.
Oh yeah. The language as a whole.
Yeah.
It's fun. I had fun doing it. Well, it was one of the first things I built.
Yeah. When I submitted mine to a company years ago, somebody actually opened like a pull request because I had misspelled something which is what you want to do on a resume. But it was cool. I was like, oh, I know they at least looked at it.
Did you accept the pull request?
No, I declined it.
I declined.
Closed without comment.
You're like, please add tests.
Yikes. Let's see here. 3 episodes ago now, gosh, feels like an eternity. We had Konnor on. We're trying to migrate Podia off Webpacker. We could talk about that a little bit. First thing we did was actually migrate all our images out of Webpacker. We run all our icons and illustrations through inline SVG, which uses inline SVG pack tag for us. And before I do that, I had to go through and removed probably like 100 images that weren't used anymore, like in the asset pipeline. So that was actually a small thing that we did that brought us probably no gain, because like it did increase build times. It may actually probably make the asset pipeline take longer to compile. But the next thing that's actually of interest to me is that we stopped running our styles through Webpacker, and we've already stopped that. And we put in CSS bundling Rails like you do in 2022, and we just did Sass straight up. And our Webpacker compile times in production are down between 40 seconds and a whole minute just by taking Sass app. And locally, they compile so much faster. When you're using Sass -- watch, which is when you're using the watch flag, which is what the command does for CSS bundling out of the box, it doesn't have the full weight of rebuilding all the files. It just rebuilds like what changed. And I guess it keeps some kind of cache in memory because it's fast. It's a lot faster than doing just like a cold compile for all the assets. That's already an improvement. We're still on the JavaScript side of things, but it does take about 10 to 15 seconds to compile all our Sass with just the standalone, but that's still almost a 30, 40-second improvement.
Solid. That is in line with the improvements I saw switching Jumpstart Pro and everything over Go Rails and whatever to it. It was, I mean, sometimes in production on a small server, the Go Rails servers, 2 gigs or 4 gigs of RAM, that would take 5 minutes to compile sometimes with Webpacker, and now it's 30 seconds or less every time. And I had very little stuff in there. Sometimes it was just like heavy CPU, heavy RAM usage, just lots of things it was doing. And you pull out those steps and man, it is lightning do And you just are basically delegating straight to the tools that they want you to use anyways, which is way simpler. The solution is basically, hey, what if we just run a command and have it output files to a certain directory? That's literally all the bundling Rails libraries do for JS and CSS. And like, it's awesome.
What's cool too is we still have 2 pages in the app that still use these legacy styles. I'm actually still running them through like sprockets. So I have them like living together in app asset style sheets, but I'm able to like delegate the old ones and they're going to be removed soon. It's nice because conceptually it's so much simpler. It's just we're literally taking a bunch of Sass files and throwing them through the Sass CLI.
Half the problem that I was running into was like Sass Rails got switched to running on Sass C Rails, and that hasn't been updated properly for like quite a long time. So you didn't know it, but you were running Sass Rails and it was on a very old version of Sass. And so there was some syntax that I tried to use that was pretty simple, but it didn't compile. It didn't know what to do with it. And so I would end up with, I think, something happened and it would just clobber all the CSS or something. I forget what it was. Sometimes it wouldn't compile, period, but those were frustrating times. And then when you switch to this where it's like, hey, how about we take no interest in how this stuff works? Just let you do whatever the heck you want.
Yep.
That is a beautiful solution because it's so simple to maintain and it's so flexible for pretty much anything you would want to do.
Great. We had a problem adopting M1 because we were still using Node Sass, which was using a deprecated version of Sass that was not going to get updated for like M1 machines. So then we had to upgrade like the Node dependency to like another version. I think we actually got it on Dart Sass maybe, but it still ran through like Webpacker's like bundling process. And so now like, I just know we're running Dart Sass and I know this is the tool that Sass like has provisioned to compile. It's wonderful. But the next roadblock we have is what we're doing is we're migrating these packs one at a time, like over to like ES build. But the problem I'm facing now is that we still have some legacy JavaScript running through the asset pipeline, and it does not let you run these two things side by side, or at least however we have it configured. So I'm getting like an uglifier error because it's, I guess, trying to do something with uglifier and this new JavaScript that I'm trying to compile with ES build. And that has been a problem. So like it works fine locally. It just, when you go to deploy it, I even tried like commenting out like uglifier the gem, and then it really blew up then. So
yeah, you reminded me of like those, I forget what it was. Uglifier, like the harmony mode or something. Have you run into that before? Like uglifier wasn't able to like parse some ES6 thing, or I forget what it was, but you could say harmony is true and it would change some way it was try and parse things. I don't even remember. It's been so long, but those are the interesting ones. It may have been uglifier actually. There was something in there where the Sass, I think the Sass C or Sass Rails gem adds uglifier in only in production. So all these development things you will run will work fine. And then of course, production's a little bit different and it just doesn't work. It's one of those where that's a good reason to have a staging that fully replicates production. But if the gem actually says, if the environment's production do this different thing, it's not going to show up in staging. So that is annoying too, where you're like, as best as we can try to replicate production in the staging environment, we run into that issue. If we have a separate name for staging, which I know that Heroku recommends, like your staging environment should run Rails and production for that reason. So that's actually
how we called it.
Production. Yeah.
We called it in staging because we run it as production. So I literally I wrote this Basecamp post Tuesday before I left for my trip. And I was like, hey, I have this pack converted to ES build. Like, I'm so excited for y'all to try it out. Please do it while I'm gone. And then I couldn't get it to compile. So I just deleted the Basecamp post. So I'm actually just working to remove the legacy JavaScript instead of figuring out this problem.
Goodbye, jQuery.
Yeah, no. We're still on Bootstrap 4. We still have jQuery. Don't you sweat.
Our matching jQuery tattoos.
I only have one tattoo, but now I want to get another one. I want it to be a dollar sign.
One of my friends has a close head tag and open body tag on the back of his neck, which I thought was beautiful. Just perfect. You can get a script tag for jQuery right above the closed head tag.
I was looking something up for JavaScript yesterday, and I could not get Google to give me any results that weren't for jQuery, to the point where I was like, no jQuery. And it was like, oh, here's the jQuery docs on how to do it. And I was like, oh my God.
And they're like, no results.
That's awful.
I want to point out the interesting thing of the idea that Rails could sort of simplify Webpack with Webpacker. And they've done that, including jQuery prototype. Was there a time when Scriptaculous or whatever was in Rails way back when? I don't remember.
It would have been before me.
Yeah. Anyways, it's interesting to look at all of the stuff over the years, having all of these different approaches for JavaScript, going from Rails UJS and having that in CoffeeScript and everything, to the current solution, which is, hey, what if we just don't care about it and we let you figure it out? And here's a couple options. It's really interesting to see the evolution of that. I just wanted to point that out. Hey, we would love to make this nicely integrated, but it's too complex and we can't really control this very well. And we struggle with this. And you see that change a bunch over the years. And then you kind of come back all the way full circle to now, where it's kind of the admission of oh, turns out front-end JavaScript, everybody wants to do it different. JavaScript doesn't even know how they want to handle the front end or the back end or any of this stuff. So let's just not worry about it and just set up some rules. You run a command, whatever you want, output the files here, voila. And it's just really nice to see some of those solutions come full circle like that. I wish this would have happened 10 years ago, but here we are, finally have a good, robust solution in that you can do literally whatever you want. I really like that it's so simple, so easy to maintain, and so flexible. And it like ticks all the boxes really nicely. Whereas the other solutions were like, they're not easy to maintain and they're not that flexible and whatever. Like you had like pros and cons to it, but now you have one that's kind of like mostly pros. The con maybe is that it doesn't choose things for you, right? Whatever. Most people want to make that decision of Bootstrap, Tailwind, whatever, or React or Vue or whatever. So,
right. Specifically with like CoffeeScript, I think CoffeeScript was, at least when I was learning Rails, it was such a welcomed flavor of JavaScript because it did a lot of things JavaScript couldn't do yet, but that ES6 and above really fixed. I think that's part of the reason now today, and now that it's more widely adopted, like modules and things like that, it's why we can go back to just, okay, like just do whatever you want. And the tooling is getting more advanced and more complicated, but it's better nowadays to let someone who really cares and goes deep on JavaScript tooling to figure out how to make that better instead of us trying to recreate it in Ruby, which is what I think a lot about of like what the asset pipeline was giving you like Ruby tools to do these sorts of things. Speed-wise, we obviously just can't compete with some of the modern tooling in terms of compiling and stuff.
Hi, my name is Andrew Mason, and I'd like to tell you about Honeybadger. Whether US East 1 is down or you forget to add a configuration file, everyone has an outage from time to time. When your next outage occurs, transparency is critical. The difference between a minor annoyance that people soon forget and a fiasco that creates sustained resentment is how you communicate. That's why you need Honeybadger. Honeybadger is a crucial component of your incident response plan with their uptime monitoring service that now has an exciting new feature, public status pages. Create a new status page with custom domains, branding, and more. Don't let Twitter be the only way your users can find out if your app's down. Sign up for Honeybadger to improve your incident response with a shiny new status page that you'll be proud to show users. Visit honeybadger.io and start giving your users a better experience today. Let them know that Remote Ruby and specifically Andrew Mason sent you.
Did you ever use the railsassets.org site? And you could basically convert an NPM package to a Rubygem with it automated. So you could add jQuery through there or Bootstrap or whatever. And it's fascinating to like look at that solution. And it made a lot of sense because that was kind of a natural way that you could include stuff into the asset pipeline. But from the outset of looking at that, it's like a weird thing to wrap JavaScript code in a Rubygem purely for including it in the asset pipeline. And so now life's a lot easier because you can use whatever JavaScript tool, NPM or Yarn or whatever to handle things. But yeah, it has gone through so many different iterations of things because the browser was so different way back when. You didn't have all of the niceties that you have now. CoffeeScript was wonderful, but it was also one of those things where it was like Rails needs to depend on this thing to convert your CoffeeScript to actual JavaScript that we actually ship to the browser. And should we wrap that? How do we make that a thing? And you could easily have put CoffeeScript into JS bundling and had it run this on my file, dump it into the asset pipeline. But it made more sense at the time to like make a wrapper around it and CoffeeScript Rails and whatever. So it's been interesting to see that. And I don't know, it's something that I think about a lot where if you're writing open source code, you're like trying to save people time and abstract things. But sometimes you can go overboard on that. And maybe the simpler solution was more flexible for everybody and easier for you to maintain. And it's interesting to see how do you strike that balance whenever you're building open source things, or doesn't it have to be open source either?
Speaking of gems that just like wrapped things for the asset pipeline. So as part of my SaaS work that I did recently, so our legacy stuff is like on old Bootstrap's 3 screens. And those were served, like Bootstrap was served through the Bootstrap SaaS gem, I think it was, whatever. Like Bootstrap used to actually ship all of their files as like a Ruby gem. So that was an opportunity to remove that because what I did was we still needed it, but instead of like it being served through a gem, I went back, downloaded Bootstrap 3, the last version of it, and served it through the vendor directory, which I feel like I haven't touched vendor in 6 years, but it just worked. And so that allowed us to serve the old Bootstrap stuff out of there and then serve our new Bootstrap stuff through Node modules. So it's working. I'm really optimistic. I'm excited to get this JavaScript stuff over DS build because I feel like we can reduce our build times in production by a massive amount.
Yeah, most definitely. It's one that is nice too because the author of that is really focused on like, hey, we're not going to go build these features because they're complicated and that would make it slow. So we're just going to focus on making things simple and really fast and just keep the speed as the priority here because that has been the issue for a long time. But then, of course, you get things like bun.sh. So new things on the block all the time. And we'll have to play with that sometime. I haven't used it yet, but I like that trend of, we can do all this cool new stuff, but it's really slow. And now we can do it faster. So win-win-win.
Andrew, tell us about your new podcast because we weren't good enough for you. We weren't satisfying you.
Better not lose you.
Sorry. My mind went somewhere dirty. I'm back. Yeah. So this week, Julie and I launched Ruby for All, which is a Ruby podcast kind of aimed at providing something for juniors specifically. So that's like our key audience is junior Rails developers or people kind of getting into Rails. We're kind of just having honest conversations about whatever we think is kind of important or whatever she's thinking about, whatever I'm thinking about, kind of talking through some subjects that I think are interesting or that we both think are interesting. And yeah, so it's been a lot of fun so far. And we launched the first one on Thursday, which is the 28th of July. I guess we just dated ourselves. I mean, we made a whole talk on launching a podcast. I forgot how hard it can be. So it was kind of interesting to do it again because I haven't launched a podcast in 2 years, I think, since the Ruby blend. So you kind of just forget like all these little things like here and there that are things you want to do. But it's been a lot of fun and I'm hoping that we can sustain it. And I'm hoping we can find some sponsors because shout out to Julie, God bless her soul, because she's offered to edit them. Although we're trying to get to a place where we just don't edit. But my hope is we just find a sponsor and I hit up Paul and we put that woe behind us.
That's exciting. I got to talk to Julie at RailsConf after our talk and it was a lot of fun chatting with her. So I think it's really cool that y'all are starting a podcast. What are some of the things that have been difficult? Like some of the things that you've forgotten about?
Intro music, I couldn't be bothered, honestly, because like I forgot about it. And then by the time I remembered it, I was like, do we really need intro music? Yeah, probably. But like, how important is it in the first few episodes? Not really that important. So that's one thing kind of on the list. The other thing is like, I forgot that you have to publish the first episode in order for it to be published on a bunch of these platforms like Apple and Google and Spotify and all that. So like the night before I was trying to get the podcast in all these different catalogs and obviously the RSS feed was empty. So it couldn't pull it. And a lot of platforms also pull directly from Apple Podcasts. So if your podcast isn't on Apple, then a bunch of the other ones won't have it either. And there's a waiting period. There's review periods for some of them. It takes time to syndicate. I thought Apple was going to take longer because I thought there was a manual review, but it just let me submit it. And it was on the store like pretty quickly after. But like all the ones that kind of depend on it, Overcast and Castro and things like that, which just pull straight from the Apple Podcast directory. Those take a day, 2 days, maybe more to syndicate. And then Google has a review process and, you know, all this other stuff. So I forgot about that retroactively. I should have published it before and then actually announced it on Thursday, but I didn't do that. So a shout out to Transistor because that makes things so much easier, I think, and faster to just get like a quick, nice looking site up really quickly. And it will try to syndicate it to as many platforms as it can and just makes it pretty easy. So shout out Transistor. I'm a big fan of Transistor. And the other thing was podcast artwork. Forgot about that. I take that back. I knew and procrastinated it. because I know how this is going to go, because I have a design background, but for some reason, I don't know if I'm just not creative or what, but I have the actual ability to create whatever I want. I don't have it in my brain. So the artwork doesn't look that amazing. I did the best I could I just drew like a Ruby object and then threw some text on it. But I don't know if anyone's out there and has an idea or concept for making it better, let me know, because that's, I think, something we want to do. I also remembered, like, at that time, I was trying to look back. I was like, how did I make the Ruby blend one? But then I remembered I didn't actually make it. We actually used a team. CodeFund had access to a team at Consensus who did the actual design for us. And it looks really good. I heavily contemplated just stealing it. But yeah, those are like the details of it, because we had followed a lot of the advice that we gave in that talk. Like before we launched, I think we've already recorded 3 or 4. So we already have 4 recorded. And I think I'm not really concerned about us stopping. So I think on that end, we're pretty good for the consistency part. It's just the little details when you get close to launch, just like with every project.
I bet you could find somebody on Fiverr or something.
Yeah,
cheap
I thought about that. I've done that
a little
though,
thing.
and I've never liked what they've sent back. And I guess that's the curse of knowing design but not being able to implement it, because I can look at a design and be like, oh, that's crappy. That's not very good. That's not what I'm going for. But like, I can't then make my own version of it.
Or you can't articulate what needs to change to make it what you want. I have that trouble too. But yeah, that brings me right back to the early days of remote Ruby. We had all those same things that were just kind of like, I guess we got to go do this and we got to go do that. Oh, I forgot about this. And give it a month and you'll probably have most of those kinks worked out. But yeah, that early stuff is a lot. Are you, for anybody who hasn't listened to the first episode yet, like, what's the theme? Are you going to have guests? Is there any other structure ideas that you have that you want to do with the podcast?
Hold on. Sounds like you didn't listen to it, Chris.
I did not.
Did you listen to it?
I listened to the first 10 minutes or something.
Oh, my Lord. Ow. That's why I started another podcast right there.
That's fair. Andrew actually told Chris that he started it because he thinks I'm a jerk.
Yeah, but that was a joke. And I made sure to include the all-important /s at the end.
/s. I feel like
I
was on Reddit.
Yeah, I spend too much time there. It is focused on juniors, like I said, and it's basically, she's a junior. I'm quote unquote a senior. I don't know how I feel about that title, but it's kind of just like an honest conversation about like things that we struggle with, trying to find common ground, kind of trying to teach through experience and just kind of give advice to juniors and provide like something that's a lot more lower level. Because like the other day, the focus of mine that I'm trying to keep in mind is like trying to explain things that mean something to me, but may not mean something to anyone else. On the first episode, I said the definition of the hallway track, and I had several people be like, I had no idea what the hallway track was. Thank you so much for explaining that. And it's little things like that that's like, oh, that's interesting. So I think I'm not going to spoil the episodes that we've recorded so far, but it's definitely going to be focused on juniors. I think a lot of maybe not actual Ruby, but a lot of how do I be a developer? How do I work with people? How do I communicate with people? Kind of trying to hit on the things that like I see juniors struggling with and that she sees juniors struggle with and has also struggled with herself. And she's a lot closer because she is, I think, a year or 2 into it. Even though I'm only 4 years into it, she's still closer and has a lot more of those like, oh yeah, I remember struggling with this and that. So I don't know, it's going to be fun. I think our goal is just going to be providing a resource for juniors, just so, because there's a lot of Ruby podcasts. Like we talk about stuff all the time that's kind of high level and we don't really explain what it is. And we kind of just like go with it. But there's a lot of people listening that may not know what we're talking about. Like I remember the first time I heard AREL mentioned on a podcast and I had no idea what it was.
I still have no idea what it is.
Yeah, basically same. But actually I do, because I went to Jason's talk at Sin City Ruby. But it's just things like that, you know, just trying to provide a resource, a welcoming space and be like, hey, we all think we all suck. So how do we like let other people know that these feelings are valid and that we all experience them and how to kind of combat them, and also Ruby stuff on the way. I will spoil this one because I think this one will be out by the time this episode airs that we did an episode on Bridgetown, which I don't think I did a very good job at, but it is what it is at this point. But basically just kind of literally just walking through what it is from a high level concept and going through some of the constructs in it. So like, I think we might do some stuff like that where we take topics and break them down into smaller chunks and kind of discuss them a little bit. And we're doing a 30 minutes, so not an hour. So just kind of a shorter one. And for guests, the way we kind of worded it was it's not going to be a guest focused podcast, but if we need a guest to come explain something that we are incapable of explaining, that's when we'll do that. I don't think either of us really want it to be a podcast where, oh, tell us about yourself and like how you got into Ruby, even though you've told us on 8 different podcasts and all this other stuff, right? So I think if we do bring on guests, it's going to be very like focused on, okay, this person's an expert at this thing. Come break that topic down for us.
Nice. You may be a junior in anything, but if you're talking about the stuff that you're learning, you will still always help anybody who's a step behind you. So you may not be confident in talking about whatever topics, but if you're learning stuff and talking about what you're learning, you're still going to be extremely helpful to anybody there. And that's like a problem that we will have. It's been 10 years or more since I like learned Ruby for the first time. So there's a lot of things that I don't remember struggling with at the time. So I can't even relate to some of those things anymore because they're second nature or whatever now, or I learned it and I forgot that I didn't have that mental model or whatever back then. So yeah, I'm excited for it. We need more podcasts like that. So encourage anybody else to do the same thing. Give your angle on whatever it is. There's a million different things you could do. So I'm excited. That's great. I feel like we're seeing more podcasts crop up. We're going to see hopefully more Ruby Rails conferences come up. Maybe we will see a resurgence. Hopefully. I'm excited about that, but we'll see.
Yeah, and it's only been out for a day, but the numbers they did on the first day alone were pretty good. So I will just echo my call that if you're interested in sponsoring us, reach out at feedback@rubyforall.com or andrew@rubyforall.com and let's talk, because that would go a long way in helping us keep this sustainable. If we can get enough sponsors, just like we do here, we can just get enough to like pay for our editor, that would be amazing. I think take a lot of stress off both of us. So sponsor us, because the reception it got was really, really good. And the numbers it did on the first day alone was over 100 on the first day of the first episode. That's kind of insane. I think this is going to be really good, and sponsor us. I know there are people out there listening that may have wanted to sponsor us, but we have Honey Badger because they're amazing and they're our exclusive sponsor right now. So if you wanted to sponsor this podcast, hit me up.
Definitely do. Yeah, I love it. It's a great endeavor. I can't wait. I'm going to have to listen to it this weekend while I'm doing some mundane yard work or something. So that'll be great. I really like the idea of let's make one kind of specifically for juniors in a way. That's, among many things, a great way to help have more juniors in the community and all of that. So yeah, like we've talked about many times, this is one of those great ways to contribute.
Yeah, this is how I'll get Jason to listen. Jason, your name was mentioned. So now I called you out for something. You'll have to find out if it was positive or negative.
Great.
It was positive. I was angry because I'm not as good as you.
Positively negative?
Yeah. That's that.
On an unrelated note, did you know that July 31st, 2 days from now, 2022, is when George Jetson will be born?
I have been seeing that float up on Reddit recently.
This is a game changer.
Yeah.
And we don't have...
Isn't that wild? I saw a tweet that said, I don't need to alarm anyone, but someone is about to give birth to George Jetson. I thought that was a great way of wording it. Like, somebody will have George Jetson as their baby. They don't know it yet.
Think about
someone with the last name Jetson has already planned to name their child George. Please, universe.
If not, you need to change your last name ASAP.
Yeah.
But think about it. The world doesn't have to be like the Jetsons when he's born, because he's an old ass man in that show.
That's true.
Yeah.
He is the future boomer. So yeah, that's true. What? He was probably like 40 or 50 in the show. Like a lot can happen in 40 or 50 years.
Frankly, I'm just amazed that you even know who George Jetson is.
Yeah.
This seems like way ahead of your time.
It is, but my parents didn't let me watch like a lot of the cartoons that like my generation watched because they thought they were stupid or something else. And so I kind of grew up on like really old stuff because that was what they would let me watch. I was not allowed to watch SpongeBob really. So when I watch videos and people my age are like referencing all these SpongeBob episodes and I'm like, ugh, I don't know what you're talking about. Like the only time I could watch SpongeBob is when I went to my grandmother's house and she lived a state away. So that wasn't often. But when I was there, I watched SpongeBob the whole time.
So I have an idea for a gem name. George Jetson, his occupation was digital index operator at Spacely Space Sprockets. So we need the Spacely Space Sprocket library.
Are you saying Sprockets is going to make a comeback in the next 40 years?
No.
Apparently. It's going to be a company, actually.
Rust.
Rust is so 2022.
Yeah, you're right. What are we writing in now? Zig or something? That's a real language, right? I didn't make that up.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
No.
Okay, cool.
I don't remember anything about what it's designed for.
I feel like it's fast. That's all I remember.
Yep. It's a general purpose programming language and tool chain for maintaining robust, optimal, and reusable software.
So it's just like every other programming language.
That sounds kind of like that.
Cool. Yeah. I just want to know when C++ is coming out.
So they say it's for reusable software. What software is not reusable? Like it self-destructs at the end of executing?
The software that I write.
I was in college and I wrote I think it was college or shortly after, I tried to build a suicide Rubygem. So if you ever raise an exception, it would rescue from it and then RMRF all the files on your file system. And it would just destroy your operating system, or I tried to. And Ruby actually like protected against that. I couldn't figure out how to get it to destroy my computer. It was like Ruby on hard mode.
Chaotic evil.
Ruby on hard mode. If you make a mistake, it just deletes everything. So that was my grand idea in college.
I guess if you did it in a Docker container.
Yeah, I was testing in virtual machines. Yeah, good times.
I don't even know if I trust computers enough to run RMRF / in a virtual machine.
It's fine. I did that once during class. I had a full screen virtual machine and then ran it and watched all the fonts disappear and things blow up. So it's safe. You just got to make sure that if you're full screened, that you know that you're in the VM versus your actual operating system. You just don't want to make that mistake. But I guess if you put everything on the blockchain, like it would be fine. You would never lose it, right?
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure that's how it works.
The indestructible blockchain.
Yeah. It's just a permanent history of your bad mistakes.
The blockchain is actually just a Kafka stream.
It's kind of like
Kafka is too, immutable.
It's kind of just a stack of 3x5 index cards. Like we've just come full circle to the old days of programming.
Yeah, punch cards.
Yeah. See, again, how do you know these things?
Because y'all told me about them. I learned about that I learned about that when I was taking a computer science course and they were teaching us about the history of computer science.
Was all that stuff in black and white?
Yeah. Grace Hopper was in them. Admiral Grace Hopper.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that note.
Okay, bye.
Ship off.
Later.